Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, after talking about how the Lee Anderson scandal may risk Sunak's entire election strategy and how this may be another factor nudging the Tories towards an autumn election, I'd like to discuss yet another reason why this would be a very risky plan. I've discussed how extra problems arising as the year progresses may put the Tories in even worse shape this autumn compared to spring. But we haven't really talked about natural wastage of Tory voters with each passing month. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So there's a growing list of things which makes me think, yeah, I could see the Conservatives backing out and dragging this Parliament into autumn before the election. And then an even bigger list of things that makes me think, yeah, but I'm not sure autumn's in their interest. But the usual caveat with anything which might affect Conservative strategic thinking is that I don't think they've been particularly strategic in recent years. Case in point, this photo of a mobile cabinet meeting in Yorkshire this week. No way that Downing Street, were it being run by people who understand anything about politics or campaigning, would ever have published that photo. The exercise itself was fairly bizarre. I'm all for Parliament moving away from London. And so I wouldn't object to the cabinet meeting being in different parts of the country as well. But what was the purpose of this? Why would you hold a cabinet meeting in a workshop? What we have here is an exercise which would have cost the taxpayer extra in transport. It probably wouldn't. Hopefully it wouldn't have been ridiculous cost, but it would have cost us extra in transport for nothing more than a photo opportunity. And if this was the photo which resulted, I don't think anyone got value for money. So what's this latest discussion around why the Tories wouldn't ideally delay the election for much longer? Well, there are lots of things which could happen to make things worse for the Tories this year, and there are some things which are certain to make things worse. One is mortgages. The Tories rely disproportionately upon homeowners for voters, which is why it's mad that they adopted a housing policy which significantly restricts the number of homeowners. This year, a lot of them are coming to the end of their fixed terms and being handed deals with much larger repayments. With each passing month, another load, and it is a load, of mortgage holders finds their disposable incomes shrinking significantly, maybe even being wiped out. Some, may have to sell and downsize. So the difference between calling an election in May and calling for one for like October or November is hundreds of thousands of more mortgage holders deciding, yeah, we don't really like this Conservative government. But there's another certainty as well. It's quite a grim one, I'm afraid. Dylan Difford has been at it again with his brilliant charts. This one shows the breakdown of the swing from the Conservatives to Labour by source. Now, for the purpose of this video, the interesting one is the 2% due to natural wastage. So what does that mean? Well, all parties have lost voters since the 2019 general election to the grim march of time. Millions of people have died since the last election. Not all of them would have voted. However, it's worth bearing in mind three things. First, the majority of those who will have died in the last few years will have been elderly, whether due to natural causes or natural old age, I should say, or some disease to which they are particularly vulnerable, COVID or something for which a struggling NHS could not deal with in time. A higher proportion of elderly people vote compared to all other age groups. And third, the Conservatives are famously dependent upon elderly voters during elections. A much higher proportion of Conservative voters are elderly compared to other parties. Now look at this next chart. The x-axis along the bottom is age. The y-axis up the side is the proportion of people of that age who either voted for a particular party or, as is the case for the final chart, say they intend to vote for a particular party. Now, we could marvel at the comparison between the 2019 election and the current polling. In 2019, the Conservatives had a ridiculous share of the elderly votes, nearly off the scale. It sort of is. But let's just look at the current polling. The pattern, similar to 2019, in that Labour are getting the lion's share of younger voters, not so much of the older voters, a complete mirror of the Conservatives' breakdown. But in the here and now, not only are the gradients for both Labour and the Conservatives shallower, but Labour have almost as much of the share of elderly voters as the Conservatives. But that is not the key point. The key point is that the Conservatives are still very reliant on these elderly voters, and they're really not getting very many of the younger voters. And some of these elderly voters will die. Now, this is also true of Labour, and if you look at the current voting intention, it actually looks like Labour could be losing just as many voting intentions amongst the very eldest as the Conservatives, right? But every elderly person currently intending to vote Conservative who passes away between now and the election is a greater proportion of the Tory vote. What it means is, if everything else were to remain the same, the gap between Labour and the Conservatives naturally increases as 2024 rumbles on, purely because the Tories will be losing a larger proportion of their intending voters than Labour will. Now, if the Conservatives think they can counter this by winning back more undecided voters, or voters currently saying they'll vote for someone else than they're losing to Father Time, then okay, that's a net benefit to them. They could still say, let's keep the campaign going longer. But if the Tories find that they're simply making no headway in winning over these voters, and at the moment they are not, then each extra month's delay just means that their pool of voters gets smaller and smaller. And it's not going to make a huge difference nationally, but it can make the difference in a few marginal constituencies. And it is just one more reason why, if the Tories decide to back off a May election, they could just make their defeat worse in autumn. You might argue their saving grace is that deaths are not evenly distributed across the year. Much fewer die in summer than, say, autumn and winter. But even taking that into account, it shows that the longer a parliament drags on, the higher proportion of support the Tories risk losing. And when they've already lost a lot of voters just to saying they're going to vote for someone else, or not vote for the Tories at least, that is a massive problem for them. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.